Welcome to the Level 1 News Show. We don't have a name. There's not a name. If you've got an idea for a name, put it in the comments or the description. Make a post on the forum.level1text.com, because that's the new thing. If you haven't heard about Level 1 Text and what's going on with that, there's another link in the description that's below. If you're like, wait a minute, isn't this the hardware channel? There's some things you should take a look at in the description. We're not going to go over that now, but I guess that kind of is the big news, is that this is Level1Text.com, sort of Logan and I split, and he's continuing on with the Tech Syndicate name, and I get the hardware channel, so there's going to be more than just hardware videos, but there's a video about that, longer, more info on the website, more info everywhere else. Don't really want to get into it. Right now we need to talk about the news. We need to talk about how the Internet of Things is here to kill us all. Literally 1.2, 1.3 terabit. The Internet of Things, denial of service, botnet, zombie apocalypse, it's really bad. And my friend Ryan is here to help me, so I'm not making a complete ass out of myself alone.
Hey, I'm here to be an ass too.
Look at that. All right, let's take a look at the news. These are one-tab pages, hopefully in the description. Maybe we'll have timestamps, who knows. The Linux copy on write vulnerability. It affects basically everything, not just Linux, but of course Android, which is based on Linux, because it's deep enough. It's a problem that goes back like 9 years, plus or minus. So pretty much everything that you can think of Linux related is affected. If you haven't rebooted your server since about October 20th, you need to reboot your server, and your server runs Linux, of course. Pretty much everything Linux is affected.
That's pretty serious.
The Internet of Things, just the crazy thing is that Mirari botnet, which is what existed before this, which is based on Internet of Things devices like DVRs and cameras and stuff, was not based on this vulnerability. This vulnerability came out after that. And so there are bad people that are actively working to augment that code with this code to build an even larger, more powerful botnet. So this is bad. This is really bad. This is like, oh, there's zombies only. It's only Atlanta. Zombies only took over. All the zombies got out of Atlanta. It's now now it's all of North America. Now it's the entire globe. Everybody's gone.
And really, it's a bad sequel. It's literally like the only story is it got worse. Bigger and more powerful robots. It writes itself.
I thought you were going somewhere with some type of SQL injection joke, and it was like, where's it going to go with this? Because it's a really bad sequel, and it's like, oh, we're already off the rails. This is not good.
But, I'm sure the Apple fanboys are celebrating, but they shouldn't be, because of course there's an Apple vulnerability this week as well.
The news with this one is that Google apparently sat on this vulnerability in iOS and macOS, which is as severe, almost as severe as the Linux copy on write vulnerability, for 5 months.
Wow. It's that's pretty serious, and you got to wonder, is it more dangerous to leak it and let the damage happen before they can patch it, or is it more dangerous just to hide these things?
It is sort of an interesting dichotomy between these two problems. The Linux copy on write thing definitely wasn't sitting on somebody's desk for 5 months.
No.
But the vulnerability here in iOS and macOS could have been used to build a botnet just as quickly. I mean, it's pretty severe, and you have to reboot your Linux machine in order to patch this. When you install the new kernel, you'll have to patch. Unless you're running OpenSUSE with live patching, in which case, if you want to learn more about that in song form, you should Google Uptime Funk, and then watch Uptime Funk, and then thank Brian Lunduk for writing the lyrics for that, and the production crew and all that. And because OpenSUSE will let you patch the kernel while it's running. And there are some patches to do that.
To be fair, you can make the argument that most of the internet isn't running on Apple systems, so it's not that big a deal if some hipster musicians get rooted. That's in comparison to the entire internet.
Most of the internet is running Linux, though. So right. Most of the internet is not running OpenSUSE.
So you can't wait 5 months when it's an important product.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, Google's like, I think part of it is probably also, too, that there's kind of a strained relationship between Apple and Google. They're basically frenemies, I think.
Yeah, it's like Batman and the Joker.
I wonder which one's which.
I think we know which one is. So really, come on.
You know things are bad when Scientific American is even doing an article on the Internet of Things, and the Internet of Things is out of control.
Yeah, let's say it's growing too fast. I would go even further, and I would say it's growing, and people don't. I think a lot of the Internet of Things customers don't understand that they're Internet of Things customers. I think a lot of these IP camera owners didn't really get that they were part of this.
You get that call from your ISP, and it's like, sir, we think that your internet-connected DVR is involved in some sort of botnet P2P scheme where there's a command and control server located, and the guy on the other end of the phone is just like, well, I understood some of those words.
Yeah. And, it's funny because you hear a lot of stories about people, they'll run Tor exit nodes, and the next thing they know, their doors are getting kicked in. Because a lot of law enforcement still doesn't get that whole the IP is not the person thing.
Yeah.
And actually, we got a story coming up later about these new trade agreements, and that just makes that even more draconian. So a lot of people have devices that are doing things that they don't know about, and that can have more implications in the future.
Between the Merari botnet source leak and this Linux cow thing, I'm kind of surprised that nobody has put together malware to add all of those compromised devices as Tor exit nodes, because that would just create a whirlwind of insanity pretty much immediately.
That would be amazing, yeah. That would actually almost be a beneficial use of it, though, so I don't think they'll do that.
You know that you're in a situation where things have gone completely off the rails when even Scientific American is talking about your waffle iron getting rooted and being on the internet. The bastard operator from hell never intended for anybody to put the Model 3 actually on the internet. But here we have, people actually putting their waffle irons and their coffee pots and whatever else on the internet, and hackers are more than happy to take control of that and do scary stuff with it.
Maybe that's the thing. Maybe these marketing agencies, it's moving so fast. You have to get the new gimmicks so quickly. They're turning to things like that. It's like, what if we really did this? That would be revolutionary. It's kind of like how the government uses 1984 as a guidebook instead of a warning.
Oh my goodness. Well, the other news this week is Apple. When we started the draft outline for this, it was like there's all this Apple crap, and we don't really care, but there's actually some interesting stuff you can talk about with the new Apple laptops and some of the new Apple hardware. So the first thing is that Apple on their new MacBooks has gone all USB Type-C. Now, USB Type-C, if you've been living under a rock, is the reversible USB connection that may optionally incorporate Thunderbolt, which is a PCI Express type connectivity, PCI Express by 4. Some laptops like the Dell XPS 13 and the Razer Blade Stealth that I took a look at uses PCI Express 3.0 through that USB Type-C port. And that's what the new MacBooks feature. And they've got the 15-inch, for example, has 4 of them, but it's kind of weird.
Now USB-C, that's what's on the iPhone, right?
No, the iPhone has Lightning.
Wait, that's what's on the iPad.
Yes. No.
Oh, so no Apple devices feature?
No,
that's interesting.
No, there's just nothing. There's nothing there.
Wow.
Now,
what about the Apple Watch?
No. Here's the real mind blowing one. What about the Apple headphones? Apple's like, we need digital audio. We just can't do this analog headphone port. Blah blah blah. So the new iPhone 7 uses the Lightning headphones. So the new MacBooks have a Lightning port for their headphones too, right?
Oh, I don't think they do.
Oh, Apple, you just make it too easy. You make it too easy.
But it's okay, because Apple will take care of you. On their store, for $25, they'll sell you a conversion cable. So you're going to go ahead, you're going to get the new Apple product, you're going to get your conversion cable, you're going to get your wired headphones for use with your MacBook, and you're going to get your wireless headphones for use with your iPhone. And complete freedom. That's complete freedom right there. When you have all those things.
So I basically need adapter cables for pretty much all of these connectors, plus some of the connectors that you mentioned, which are not even pictured here, except for power. It comes with power, and that's the USB Type-C. Okay,
all right.
Cool. I mean, that makes sense. That's fine. That's totally a thing. I guess I could kind of see that. Oh wait, no. The USB Type-C connectors on one side of the laptop are different than the ones on the other. The ones on the right side have reduced PCI Express bandwidth.
So we sacrificed to bring you this new feature, but not really.
Why would they do that? Why would they do that? That makes no sense. I mean, they would have to put in a PCI Express bridge if everything was going to be connected, but that's something that Apple would normally do. Why would they do this? Yeah, Thunderbolt is available on all 4 ports, but you can't use the full PCI Express bandwidth for any devices. I mean, are they going to have a little pop-up that's like, no, I'm sorry, you plugged that in the wrong port. You need to plug it into this other port somewhere else that is otherwise identical, except for the physical location. That just seems...
It's also interesting that they would choose the right side to cripple. I mean, what percentage of the population is right-handed? It seems pretty natural.
I can't remember what... on the old MacBooks, I can't remember. I guess on the left... It was on the left side on the old MacBooks that they had the Thunderbolt ports, but... I don't know. The other big thing is they reduced the watt hours of the batteries. And so, yeah, I mean, the old MacBooks, we're talking about a 4-year-old CPU versus Skylake. They didn't even go for Kaby Lake, but we're going to talk about that in a minute. The Skylake CPUs are dramatically more power frugal than previous generations, but that's kind of misleading because they're not really that much more power frugal under load. They're that much more power frugal when they're idle or doing light tasks. So if you're using your machine full tilt, the battery's going to run down a lot sooner. I mean, there's not really a lot of power savings between the old version, the 4-year-old version of the CPU and the modern version of the CPU when the CPU and all the peripherals in the machine are fully loaded. Now, in terms of idle, the hardware acceleration, things like hardware X264 acceleration, yeah, absolutely. That is going to make a huge difference in battery life. And the battery life is going to be better. So instead of having a better battery, Apple opted to basically cut the battery about in half, maybe half in worst case scenario. So like I think the 13-inch MacBook ended up with a worse situation in terms of even web browsing and watching a movie. But Apple says that it's a better situation for watching a movie or doing web browsing on like those types of tasks on the 15-inch MacBook. But I think that when the reviews are in, when people are actually using this for anything heavier than just web browsing, which is one of the lightest tasks you can do, I think the battery life is going to be significantly worse than the prior generation, and that's unfortunate.
And that's not the only fun feature that we've learned about these beautiful new MacBooks. They have another feature. I'm sure it's a feature, right? That they are limited to 16 gigabytes of RAM.
Oh, yeah, that's power related. Yeah, because and again, battery life is a concern. It's like, oh, if we put 32 gigabytes of RAM in there, that's going to use too much power. And it's like, what? Why? Did they... I want to see the teardown. Like, if the circuit board is not twice as large, if they didn't use all of that extra real estate for more complicated circuits, I mean, if they save that much room shrinking the batteries, because battery technology has improved a lot in 4 years too, couldn't they have afforded a PCI Express switch? I mean, surely to God they could put a PCI Express switch in there, so it didn't matter where you plugged in your PCI Express peripherals. But 16 gigabytes of RAM, I mean, it seems like a lot now. But again, MacBook Pro, and look at the life cycle of the previous generation. The previous generation MacBook Pros were 4 years. So if this thing in 4 years is running Skylake and 16 gigabytes of RAM, I'm going to have to laugh derisively at that.
You know, they probably needed that room for the headphone jack.
The real headphone jack, not the lightning headphone jack?
Yeah, exactly.
Are they going to come out with a refreshed model where it's got both, and it's like, we got both, guys. It's fine. It's fine. Didn't they come out with an adapter, like an analog adapter? I guess you could do the USB Type-C analog adapter. That's what phones have done, some of them. So that's maybe an option.
I have that on my phone. I can never find it when I need it.
the adapter?
Yeah.
It's like, I need that. That's going to be great. Microsoft has come out with the Surface Studio. You know, Apple's not the... I think Apple had their press event after Microsoft. And so if you haven't seen it, the Surface Studio is this... It's a desktop computer. It's this huge 28-inch super high-resolution display, 4:3 aspect ratio. True to life colors. It can switch between the full Adobe color gamut and like what normal people have, so that designers can use that. Microsoft seems to be targeting creatives, and I watched the ad for this. It's this 28-inch studio PC kind of thing, and I watched the ad, and so it can go from this sort of easel configuration with a pen, of course, and touch, to this sort of stand-up configuration, and I thought that was sort of interesting where they were going with that. And you watch this ad. You think it's an Apple ad.
Yeah, it does seem like it's sort of targeted toward the hipster community, it seems. It's got a wacky peripheral that doesn't seem all that useful.
Are you talking about the puck?
It's using last year's processor technology. This seems like an Apple device.
Yeah, this doesn't have Kaby Lake either. It is using a quad-core part, and quad-core Kaby Lake parts are basically unavailable right now. So this is probably not available until really late in the engineering cycle. The other old technology this uses is a 980M at the top end for graphics, an NVIDIA 980M. They didn't even go for the 1080 parts. And you would think with the dramatically reduced power reduction and throttling and thermal improvements that NVIDIA has made with the 10 series graphics card that would be featured here, but it's not. It's a 9 series, it's a 980. The engineering and everything that went into this, it really does feel like this would be an iMac. And at the Microsoft press event, they also talked a lot about the creative update for Windows 10. So I think Microsoft is trying to target the creative types that historically have been very loyal to Apple.
It seems like a weird market to try to break into, considering that cult, sort of that iconic way that Apple controls those people.
I'm trying to find a good shot of the puck. The puck is this sort of mechanical switch that you can use on the screen, you can use on the desk, wherever that you might use it. It's wireless Bluetooth peripheral, and it's really not. I mean, it really doesn't seem like it would be that useful. At the actual press event, if you watch the guy use it, they have a digital artist come out, and the digital artist is doing something with it. And when he's using it for Zoom or something like that, he uses it for Zoom at first, but then he takes his fingers and he sort of does the pinching motion. And so I'm not really sure how useful this is actually going to be in the real world.
It seems like a rotational control. I mean, touch rotational control. Haven't we been doing that since the iPod? I mean, we've pretty much got that. And it's pretty accurate and simple to use. Do we really need this?
Do we need another wheel on the mouse? I mean,
they've reinvented the wheel.
I don't really understand that. It doesn't. It's everybody's trying to reinvent user interface, and I guess that's good. I guess it's good to do experimentation, but we thought it was really interesting too, the contrast between Apple. They sort of still eschewing the touch screen, but they've got a touch bar where the function keys would normally be, and Microsoft where they're going for the 10-point touch screen, but also this puck thing, which I guess theoretically would reduce the amount of greasy fingerprints that you actually put on the screen. And so Apple's like, no, we still don't think it's a good idea for people to touch the screen. We've got this fancy touch bar, and one of the demos, like they were editing a movie in Final Cut, and so the timeline for Final Cut was on the touch bar, and they were dragging custom screens there. But they've done that at a cost of removing the function keys. There's no escape, there's no F1, none of that. As a programmer, I can't imagine not having escape and F1 as physical keys all the time, no matter what I'm doing.
Imagine the effect that's going to have on legacy software. I mean, you need those keys. There has to be some sort of simulation or something, right? I mean, are they just get rid of them completely?
Yeah, I think when you're probably running legacy applications, it's probably going to give you the function keys, or you can drag it down there, and you still have escape and that kind of thing. But just not having the physical,
that's
tactile.
Frustrating. Yeah.
As a developer, I would really, really have to try that and make sure that that's not just the most awful, terrible experience. In VI, I would go back to Control C instead of Escape. I mean, I wouldn't know what else to do. There's no escape. If you're an Apple user, there's no escape and there's no help. Is that really what we're going for?
I guess so.
I don't think I could function in that environment.
Yeah. I don't think I'd want to.
Oh, Lord.
So the other big story from Apple, and this is, I don't really get on the hype train, especially for Apple. These hour-long commercials that are events. You can pay me to watch that if you want. But this story I love. Tim Cook says he's going to kill Cash. That's a bold statement.
I thought Johnny Cash was already dead.
We don't know that Tim Cook didn't kill him. It's never been proven. But the thing that terrifies me about this, and of course Tim Cook, he's going to sell it to you as a convenience thing and a safety thing. Somebody steals your phone, they can't necessarily spend your money, and cash is dirty, and it gets stolen, or you lose it or whatever. But to me, there's a more insidious aspect to this, because Tim Cook isn't the only person who wants to get rid of cash. For a long time, a lot of big names in the financial world have been talking about getting rid of cash, and governments the world over are getting rid of large denomination bills. And they say, it's terrorists and drug dealers. We got to combat terrorists and drug dealers by taking away cash. Cash is bad. Now those pallets of cash that we sent to Iran in that ransom deal, I assume those aren't included in that because we did that.
We can't fly that's just no. Yeah, I can definitely remember speeches from politicians where it's like, you can take any dollar bill and test that for cocaine and it's going to test positive because we've got a massive drug problem in this country and blah blah blah.
Yeah, the war on drugs and the war on terror. But really, in my mind, a bit of a conspiracy theorist here. Not really. In the European Union, we have something known as negative rates. Now, if you're not familiar with what that means, when banks have a reserve ratio, and when they have more money than that, they can park that money at the central bank, and they earn money from that, they earn interest. So, instead of hoarding cash and maybe getting robbed, you simply do that with ones and zeros, and you earn a little bit of money. But now, with negative rates, you're actually paying for that privilege.
We found a great article about that at the Financial Times, but we've reloaded it so many times now it wants us to pay for it.
Now that doesn't affect you as a depositor yet. So far, the banks are just eating the cost, and it's a small amount. But if it keeps up, someday it is going to affect depositors. And if all of a sudden I told you tomorrow, hey, that money that you have in the bank, you have to pay to keep that money in the bank. What would you do?
There's going to be a run on the bank.
There's going to be a run on the bank. How do you stop that? Well, Tim Cook has the answer.
You keep it with Apple?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think that pays from your bank account, right?
Yeah. So it really is crazy. But I mean, we'd love to hear from people in the European Union about what you've heard about that. Now, theoretically, the negative rates don't affect consumers yet, but it will. It absolutely will, because consumers, the banks that the consumers use are looking to do crazy stuff like physically, securely store large piles of cash, because that won't be affected by the negative interest rate, which seems completely insane. But we think that there's other interesting stuff that's happening as a result of that. Like, for example, Swiss rail operators are starting to sell Bitcoins at ticket machines now as a result of that, which is why we mention it.
Yeah, so getting rid of cash is, of course, something that's known as a capital control. And China's been on this capital control thing for years now, especially lately. They're trying to stop Chinese money from leaving the country because they have a big problem with that. And one of the things that always benefits when they introduce new capital controls is Bitcoin. So here we have another story. And if you've been monitoring the price of Bitcoin, it's gone up quite a bit in the past week.
Yeah, something like $700.
It's over 700, or was. Looks like it's gone back down a little bit now. But yeah, the high, 707. So alternative currencies benefit when these kinds of crazy financial things happen. And, you threaten the freedom of one kind of money, and you move to another kind of money.
So it's driving Bitcoin, woo, negative interest rates. I don't think anybody intended for that to happen, but it is sort of kind of happening. It's really interesting. This is something that we will follow a lot in the future, Bitcoin and currencies, and how the world currency market is sort of driving this, because technology, because of the blockchain and because of things like Bitcoin, technology has the option to be subversive or liberating, depending on how it's used and how it's implemented and what other policies are going on at the same time. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that shakes out.
Are you implying that a government program had unintended consequences? I don't think that's ever happened.
We don't really have another segue, and we don't really have a good segue or whatever.
I don't know what topic. What topic could you segue into this one on?
We don't know. Facebook apparently lets advertisers exclude users by race,
which is interesting on so many levels. The details. Now, of course, we don't want to call this racial profiling.
Well, you can't, because that would be illegal.
Clearly, Facebook has a name for this: ethnic affinities. That sounds good, doesn't it? Let's talk about our ethnic affinities. Let's go around the room. Let's pass around the talking stick and talk about our ethnic affinities. But they have the screenshots here, and they will show you when you're buying ads, you can actually choose, things here, likely to move, buying a house, all these things that they've tracked about their users with all their data mining. And while you're at it, pick the races you want to show it to.
African American, Asian American, Hispanic. I want to know if these graphics from this is actually something that Facebook came up with. I think this is probably just something that article artists came up with, but and how did they bring that up in a meeting? Like they got the developers together. They got the developers in a room, and it was like, okay, we need to add racial profiling to the website, but the middle managers can't use that terminology at all. I mean, they'd be flayed alive. So, I mean, how did that meeting come down? It's like, we need to group users according to their genetic history and diversity. And
imagine like the H-1B programmers and like the language barrier, a little bit of a language barrier. And they're like, well, I don't quite follow. And of course, all these people are the things that they're just like, okay, let's go over it again. Ethnic affinities.
So as an advertiser, I can say I'm like, let's say that I was a rice cooker manufacturer. I could just go in my ethnic affinity control panel and only advertise to a certain race. That doesn't I can't even believe this is a thing. I can't even believe this is a thing. And in America, we have, it's called Jim Crow laws, which are laws designed to prevent this kind of discrimination, but it's sort of the opposite. You can't have an advertisement that says, no black people or no Asian people or whatever. That would be against the law. But in this case, the advertisers are not advertising directly to the people they're targeting. It's like as if you have a newspaper that would display a different ad depending on what your ethnicity is, which apparently is a loophole. But I think it's probably against the spirit of the law, at least here in America.
Well, and also it's funny that the example used here, and apparently the way they found out about this is housing, because we have these crazy equal housing laws. And you can't even, sometimes you can't turn down people for valid reasons if they are one of these protected classes. Yeah. So for Facebook to do this particular thing is really, really, really amazing.
It seems a little crazy. This is just, I have a feeling we'll be hearing more about this story.
Yeah, I think this is kind of good. You know where I don't think we'll see any more of this story is on the trending Facebook.
They might suppress it.
I think they might.
Speaking of companies behaving badly with customers' data, AT&T's in the news again by getting rich by spying on customers and selling the data to the government. This is actually not news to us. We've known about this for like 10 years.
Zero surprise here.
Everybody always talks about this. This is a recent article from October 27th, but let's face it, this is actually nothing new. And in fact, not only is it nothing new, the FCC also passed rules saying, hey, we need to protect customers from this. This is not going to matter because there's already stuff in law to protect ISPs from this. There's this Helping versus AT&T case where AT&T was caught with their hand in the till previously. And they were given retroactive immunity because there was some FISA court rulings and it was basically fine. So not only did they do that, they actually do it sort of boldly. Last year, I talked a little bit about AT&T charging you $30 extra for enhanced privacy, meaning they don't spy on you on your internet connection. And most people didn't really even notice this. Most people are not even really aware that this is happening. These FCC changes are designed to make it to where people have to explicitly opt in to do this. But it doesn't really address the fact that a company like AT&T can charge you exorbitantly for not spying on you. $29 a month is nuts.
And also, what little outrage there was when that retroactive immunity came down was probably explained away in terms of, no, it's okay. We're going to stop them. This is going to be the last time. We're going to fix it. Nobody needs to go to jail. It's going to be okay. And here we are. The exact same thing. But of course, they're selling the data to the very people who are making the laws. So maybe a conflict of interest?
Yeah, this is using the data for government purposes, using the data for commercial purposes, using the data any way that they can. So because they have the data, the temptation to use the data or exploit the data commercially. Oh, and you can better believe, like if AT&T ever has any financial problems and it's like, oh gosh, Judge, we're in trouble. We need to, we really need to tap into this data set that we have. The bankruptcy court is absolutely going to let them commercialize that asset where they haven't previously, even if they've agreed not to.
Oh, yeah. You got to protect the bondholders at any cost. And of course, the Project Hemisphere, that was the other big story about AT&T. That was the government directly buying data. and for law enforcement and spying purposes, which is just crazy. Not only are they spying on us, they're farming it out. They're not even doing it themselves.
Well, that's how you do an end run around the Constitution. It's like people can be secure in their persons and papers, but if AT&T's got your data and AT&T gives you up, well, that's not unconstitutional at all. That's completely fine.
If you sign a service agreement that says we can steal it, hey, what's going to stop us?
That's really bad. Sorry, America.
We should have little flags.
And the only other thing that we had, which is an amazing piece of technology, is Russia has unveiled the Satan II missile. Couldn't even make up that name. This is a nuclear missile that will destroy an area the size of France or Texas.
Yeah. And for those of you who aren't Americans, Texas is a really big state.
It's the size of France, as it turns out.
So this is a 10-ton missile. I mean, think about the size of that. And not only is it big, but it has some new technology. Now, this is all of course, from the Russian propaganda machine reported by the fear-porn American press. So maybe it's not as bad as it could be, but even if it were half as bad, the other feature is it moves in an erratic pattern so that existing missile shield technology isn't effective against it.
Oh, this says 100 tons.
100 tons?
Because the missile will have
the
range.
Warhead.
Oh, yeah, the warhead.
The warhead is 10 tons. Yeah, it was 10 tons of nuclear material.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. 100-ton payload. Or no, 100-ton whatever, a 10-ton payload. 10-ton nuclear payload. Which
is impressive. That's a lot of nuclear material. I wonder how many of those they're going to make.
And with a range of 11,000 miles, that would almost reach Texas.
Yeah. Well, you can launch it from a ship. You get a missile sub.
That'll definitely reach Texas from international waters. Oh,
it's a very comforting thing as we go into one of the weirdest presidential elections that we've ever had, and some somewhat warmongering political candidates might get empowered.
So what you're saying is Putin has this weapon and Hillary's bitching about her email.
Well, that's another story. We didn't cover that. But the quote-unquote Ukrainians
oh, yeah,
have
Ukrainians.
They've retaliated. They've hacked Putin's aides' email. The poor Ukrainians, man. Every time it's like that friend where it's friends with both the husband and the wife, and every time they get in a fight, that person gets dragged into it. That's the Ukraine. That's the Ukraine and Syria with Iran.
Yeah, that common friend is shooting down planes apparently and hacking email and just it's all kinds of really bad stuff. Yeah, we don't. That's probably it's just we've gone off the rails. This is our inaugural episode of the news. There's a bunch more news we could cover. There's a lot of Linux news, a lot more Linux news other than the copy on write thing. Fedora 25 is basically in final beta at this point. It's really good. It's really stable. We've got a really amazing forum post that was done by Eden on the forum about the general state of Linux news. That's something I'm going to cover. We're basically just spooling up this level 1 thing, so there's a ton of work to do. Thanks for sticking with us this long. I hope you stick with us for the future.
Yep.
We're signing off for the news for now. Should see a lot of content from us soon, but we got to get all our ducks in a row for the website and hosting and the web server and get the design finalized. There's a new design. Hopefully you like it. And we've been busy.
Hopefully do this once a week.
Yeah. The idea is we'll do this once a week. Let us know what your feedback is, though.
Yeah, if you hated part of it, tell us about it.
We'll probably change out the stream computer because a lot of the equipment that we're using right now is basically borrowed. So,
Actually, here's a little insider note. This is the third take. Both of the other ones crashed at the AT&T story.
It's AT&T.
Yeah.
It's not good. Very bad. All right. We'll see you guys later. See you in the forum.
See ya.